Okay, yeah. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about SLATE and then give a little bit about what learning analytics is, and then a little bit of examples from some of our projects. We have quite a wide variety of types of projects as well. So about SLATE first. So I'm not sure how many know details about us, but actually we were established in 2016 by the Ministry of Education and University of Bergen. There was an invitation to Trondheim, Tromsø, Oslo, and Bergen to apply to host this national center. And we won the bid actually. So we were established 2016 June, and we're a national research and competence center in the area of learning analytics. And what we have say that we do is we do research on learning analytics, big and small data in education, artificial intelligence in education, assessment for learning, creativity, learning and technology, innovation and learning, but it's over all facets of human learning. So we have school projects all the way to the workplace. And we actually have one of our UU projects, we're working with seniors. So we have, it's not just school or university learning as well. One of the requirements for getting the center was that it would be in multidisciplinary center. So we have people with many different backgrounds and we work interdisciplinary in a way. So we try to work together on and take different perspectives on different topics. And one of the mandates was also that we should do this kind of research that should push the frontiers of the sciences of learning as well as inform educational practice and policy. And so now in some of the Stortingsmelding, some of our reports are mentioned there, and we're having this new national committee on learning analytics. It's a new expert group just set up this fall, where we're going to look at the political, the legal, the ethical and technical challenges with learning analytics for schools and give input to the utdanningsloven, the school law. And this should have started a year ago, but they decided to extend it to be more than just schools, but also higher education as well. So this committee will look at the whole spectrum of this, because if we get this into the law, it makes it much easier to do these kinds of tools and things that we would be doing. So the mandate for the center, just quickly, it's of course it's like the high quality research and be internationally oriented, but we also have this competence mandate where we should contribute to national competence and knowledge development on learning analytics. We should be a central resource for possibilities and challenges in the use of and research on learning analytics in Norway. Through R&D, we should develop and disseminate knowledge to relevant actors in the educational sector. So for instance, we have quite a bit of collaboration with in some projects with the EdTech sector. And we should also contribute to competence building on learning analytics in the higher education sector. So I could give a whole talk on how we do all of these things, but I won't do that today. I'll give a couple of examples of things. But the long-term ambition of the ministry is that the center should develop into a broad interdisciplinary center for the learning sciences and include disciplines such as law, philosophy, cognitive science, neuroscience, etc. And at the moment we have collaboration with the law faculty. I'll say a bit about that later. And cognitive science, we have people towards that area, and we have a collaboration starting with Karsten Specht and his group in neuroscience. This is why when they looked internationally at these kinds of centers, they saw that these were very wide competence centers. Yeah. So who we are right now, we're one professor. I have offers out to 2 new professors. Because of COVID, it has gone extremely slow, as you can imagine. Some of them can't even get here to come and see us and meet us and decide if they want to take the offer. We have 3 senior researchers, we have 2 researchers, and we have 1 professor emeritus. We have 6 PhD candidates, 4 master students, although last spring we had 9 master students who had their exams in the spring. We have 3 adjuncts in 20% positions, and I'm just going to hire a new one in December, a person in artificial intelligence and education, a little bit more my field. And we have several affiliated faculty. We have an admin leader, and we have 2 system developers. So we actually develop tools as well. And one of the affiliated researchers I wanted to see is Malgorzata Zindeka, and she's an expert in GDPR and data protection laws, and she's really worked with us in one of our projects on looking at the legal basis for using artificial intelligence in schools. It's a part of a project that we're involved in with Datatilsynet, the Data Protection Agency. So she's really great, and we're having a meeting after this presentation actually, because we're going to start a new project. In 2020, we had 34 different projects. It sounds like a lot, but the PhD students, when I asked them to describe their projects, all the 3 papers they were working on for their dissertation, they would classify those as a single project. So some of these are really just, you know, a PhD project, but some of them are much larger. We classify our work into 4 areas: creativity, learning, and technology. Learning analytics, that's really looking at things like interoperability and specifically working with data and algorithms and things like that. But we also have some projects on assessment, and we had one project on theoretical pedagogy that's done now. So, and then on emerging technologies and their underlying data, for example, like what kind of data can you get out of VR and narrative gaming and those kinds of things that are, it doesn't have to be a larger thing than just looking at a particular technology being used. We have a collaboration with TurboTape Games. So we are feeding some of our research feeds into the development they're doing in some of their tools. Here's just a quick summary of 2019, just to show an idea of how we work. So we had a number of publications, but we had these projects. We also had meetings, and what we found out once we were awarded the project or the center, already after 1 week when it was announced that Bergen had gotten it, I started getting phone calls from ed tech firms saying, okay, how do I add learning analytics to my product? And as a researcher, I wasn't prepared for that kind of answer. But there's very much interest in this and being able to take advantage of the data that we collect about students into different tools or how to understand it. So it was very interesting to me. We have a guest lecture series. So last year we were very slack and we only had 2, but we start again next Thursday. We will have another one, start our series again. We usually have 6 to 9 a year, and they tend to be people outside of our center. It's not our center's presentations. We also have those, but those are international people. And we organize events. So last year we organized 2 symposiums and 9 workshops in different conferences or involved in Nordic work on learning analytics, etc. And we have a lot of collaborators across, last year it was 12 countries. And as you can see from that little graph, we work not just with other academic centers, we work with the private sector, with ed tech, as I've mentioned before. There's some publishers in some of our, in one of the couple of the projects, and in the public sector as well. Let's see, it went the wrong way. There, let's see if we go. Yes, here's just an example. I put up some of the publications just to give an idea of the kinds of places that we publish. So for example, the British Journal of Educational Technology, Teaching in Higher Education, Creativity Research Journal, Computers and Human Behavior, Research and Practice in Technology Enhanced Learning, Frontiers in Virtual Reality, and then Tech Trends. That is my paper. I don't get to do a lot of my own research right now at the moment, but I wrote a paper with a colleague and we got ranked as the 7th best paper on digital learning last year by this NDIL list, which was really thrilling to get listed on that. So it's quite a variety of the kinds of places. They tend to be education, learning science, technology, computers and education type, human behavior type publications. And then we organized this year, this is our 2nd symposium on supporting learning in higher education and this particular one was focused on learning analytics. And we opened up, the first one we had 55 participants from within Norway, and it was everyone from people from the ministry to people working in technology or in the IT departments at different universities or colleges in Norway. But this year we opened it up since we were doing it online, and we had 370 participants from 61 countries. So it was quite interesting to get such a wide number of people. So it's a different kind of workshop than when you do something nationally where, you know, you can focus on issues we have, but it was a very interesting talk. So We're looking at everything. There's a lot of work now on using learning analytics to support feedback to students. So how do you give good feedback, and how can technology help you personalize feedback, for instance? We had a whole session on that. There was a really interesting session that's looking on the future of data-driven applications and questions about datafication and platformization of education, more social science perspectives on the fact that we're collecting all this data about us and about students and those kinds of questions. And then what does the datafication, how does that and how can that inform learning? Different ways to look at that and to make sure that we're not doing surveillance, that we're actually caring about students and giving good feedback. So it was quite interesting. That's available online on our website as well. Speaking of which, our website is slate.uib.no. I was just telling Jostein that it's not 100% up to date. It's fairly good, but not as up to date as I would like. Our publications are listed. We have a number of reports, and we have a page on each research project as well. If you go under research and go to the projects, you can find some of our projects as well. Yeah, so now that I've mentioned that we work with learning analytics, I thought I should tell you before I show you some of our projects, what is learning analytics? So this is a fast introduction to what it is. So the most used definition is that learning analytics is the measurement, collection, analysis, and reporting of data about learners and their contexts. And I'll stop there because the interesting thing here, it's data about learners, and it's also about the learning context or the environment in which the learning takes place. So it's not just about learner behavior, it's also bigger things. And it's also not just, and what we do this for is the purpose of understanding and optimizing learning in the environments in which it occurs. And now this optimizing, that's not a very good word, because how do you really optimize learning? For some reason, this came into the definition in the beginning, but I would think that it's really more about supporting learning and, improving learning or these kinds of things than optimizing. So I don't really like that optimizing word. But when I'll show you in a moment what we're talking about learning as well. So this is, it could also just say that it's about using student data to improve learning or to help them with learning outcomes or whatever you want, or teaching. So when we talk about learning, we can talk about many different things. Are we talking about learner behavior? Are we talking about learning outcomes? Are we talking about learning processes? And in learning analytics, there's lots of research on self-regulation, supporting self-regulation of students. So if you mirror back how they've been behaving in an environment maybe, or how they're progressing through learning material, and there's different ways to support this self-regulation. Sometimes it's about motivation, and sometimes it's about engagement as well. So understanding how engaged people are, etc., things like that. So when you say learning, you have to be a little bit more specific than what you mean by learning. The same when we talk about teaching, because here we could have teacher or instructor behavior. We could add in there like veiledere, like supervisors or things like that, studies, these lab leaders, the teaching assistants leading labs or things like that. It can also be about learning design, about how when we design a course, can we get feedback on how well that design works? It could be right down to a learning activity level, but also on a course level. And then it can be also on curriculum design. In the US especially, they use learning analytics a lot to look at their curriculums to see, they have a lot more freedom in the courses that you take at university there. So they can look and see about, they might identify sort of the killer course or the course that makes everybody drop out because it's so hard. And then, you want to improve that. Do you want to keep it? Maybe the idea is that you have such a course that you weed out students, but if you want to help students, maybe you could figure out what courses are hindering people from continuing and dropping out, etc. It can also be for professional development, helping teachers improve their own teaching by looking at their own student data and improving their teaching. It can be about educational praxis and also about educational spaces. So there's things looking at air quality in rooms. There's a project in Drummond where they have sensors that measure the air quality, and they find students be less attentive after the air quality gets better after lunch during the day in buildings and things like that. So there's many people about how you organize maker spaces if kids are going to work together. So there's been many projects about different kinds of aspects. And who are the stakeholders for learning analytics? Well, it can be the learners and the teachers. That's the evidence one. Tutors or study leaders, school leaders, policymakers, and tech developers, but also, of course, researchers. And for me, I've been in this field since over 35 years of the area of technology and learning. And it's only now that in the last 5 years that we've really seen the policymakers jumping in and really jumping on this bandwagon of technology and learning and making laws and looking at the laws and can we use the data and all of these things from more of a top-down perspective. We've always had technology and learning, but they haven't been involved in the level that they are now. And it's in particular because of artificial intelligence coming a resurgence. So I moved to Norway in 1991 with a fresh PhD in artificial intelligence, working in education applications and of education, and nobody in Norway was interested in that at all. So now this swing back almost 25 years later, it's like in the core again. So, and now it's with everybody in Norway is again now interested in AI. The policymakers are interested in AI, and it's data is the new gold and it's driving the economy. And there's very much interest in using all this data that we can get access to and having these fancy algorithms, etc. Some example uses. When you do learning analytics, you're usually doing one of three things, not exclusively, but you're looking for patterns. You're trying to do some predictions or making recommendations. So we can be looking for insights into different kinds of trends. I've already mentioned this thing, finding a difficult concept or a course, looking for engagement or study patterns, interactions, networks of learners, for instance, understanding learning trajectories or learning strategies of students, predict dropouts, predict success, get an early alert as an instructor. Here's somebody who seems to be looking like they're not really engaged in the course. Maybe you want to do an intervention of some sort, because there was a lot of work in the early days on retaining students at universities, because universities are very, very interested in not having dropouts and to keep students in the university. So BAE had a very nice application in this area that they did some research on that I guess it hasn't been finally implemented. And then you can do recommenders. So you can have adaptive systems that are making decisions about what a student should do next when they're learning some material. For instance, let's say in mathematics, and you decide they've answered the question this way, and then we recommend a new task for them to work on, etc. So there's lots of those kinds of systems, and they've been around actually since the 1980s. We don't have so many of them in Norway. We have one or two. Personalized feedback I've mentioned before. So how do we give good feedback to students so that it's actually understandable by them? And how can we help teachers generate this kind of feedback, or can a system give feedback? There's, again, that's been also the area of artificial intelligence, and education's worked on that. We can recommend pedagogical resources or different kinds of activities students could work on. And you could also recommend courses or curriculum design. Even there has been a lot of work in the area of recommending jobs and matching people to jobs. And we were going to be involved in a project on placement, internship placement for Arbeids relevance for that area. But if you've been following the things that happen at the university, we've put that project on hold right now. So there is a lot of work on trying to match competences to jobs or job placements and things like that. So it's many different things. So it's very, very many things. When we talk about learning analytics, we can look at the standard process, which is actually defined in the ISO International Standards Organization, where there's some kind of learning activity. We collect data, we store and process it, we analyze it, we visualize it, and then hopefully there's some kind of feedback action, because this feedback action is why we're actually doing this, if there's some kind of result from doing this kind of analysis. Each of these boxes in itself a research area. So I have a PhD student, for instance, working in this area of data storing and processing on interoperability between data sets. I have other students working on analyzing, others working on visualization. And then the beginning part, how do we actually collect the data? There's lots of questions around that go all the way to the legal point as to whether we're actually allowed to collect the data and have the student data, etc. And what kind of data do we have? So one of the big questions I always have, do you actually have the data that you need to actually answer the good education questions? So we shouldn't let it should not really be data driven. It is data driven, but it really should be data that's going to help us answer an educational or learning question, a question about learning or something. And I'll talk about that in a little bit at the end. Around this area of visualizations, it's a really big area because a lot of learning analytics presents the results in dashboards or reports of some sort. And we find that a lot of people cannot interpret the visualizations. So there's a lot of work on how do we do good visualizations and present things in ways that is actually understandable to people. So all the stuff that you can think about statisticians saying for years that people can't understand graphs and all of that, that's amplified in this field as well. So computer scientists, we like to make very fancy visualizations, but they usually can't be understood by a teacher in a classroom, for instance, that needs to look at it. So we tend to go back to more simple visualizations. Another way to look at learning analytics is this area of adaptive learning. And again, this is already, this is my PhD area, master's and PhD area already from the 1980s, actually, where we're making adaptive systems. And what happens in these adaptive systems is that we have lots of data about the student. I just use student administration data, for instance. It might have demographic data, their marks they're getting on things. And then we also have this activity data where we're collecting how the student interacts with an individual learning system called an adaptive learning environment. So then what are they clicking on? How are they answering? That kind of thing. And then in this kind of system, you would have adaptive algorithms that are using information from predictive models that will adapt the content or adapt the feedback to an individual student. So these can be quite complex systems. And then finally, another way to look at learning analytics is from an architecture perspective, because if we're going to make these things work, we need to think about how do we actually organize the data systems and the back ends of all of these things. And this is an architecture that was developed by JISC in England for higher education organizations to get them to think about what would happen. They would need to think about if they're going to do learning analytics at the universities. And JISC is the equivalent to UNIT, our unit, the Directorate for Higher Education and Research in Norway. And so they've been doing probably for the last 8 or 9 years, been working on this kind of work for. Learning analytics, I didn't bring with the slides that show that it's a new field. The term was first used around 2011. But it builds on other existing fields that have been around. So artificial intelligence and education, intelligent tutoring systems, they've been around since the end of the 70s, 80s. We've got educational data mining, which is around from the 1980s. So, and we have learning sciences from around the 2000 area, which started bringing very much the learning science people together with IT to look at learning and technology. And then the big business and data analytics, sort of what we call the big data type of movement. So it brings together things from all of these kinds of fields. And when we talk about data, we can look at, if you look on the left, you'll see the traditional learning data that would be used for doing educational research, like your typical, let me see, student information. The teacher has assignments and rubrics that she marks students with. The students make homework, they take exams and quizzes, they have behavior. You might check whether they're attending class or not, and then you have demographic data about it. So if you look, for the last 200 years, that's the kind of data they use for educational research. But now we can complement that with all this digital data. So now we have social media data, and we have particular instruments that are developed, like we can have digital questionnaires and things like that. We can have learning environments. So this would be like a learning platform or a learning tool that they use. A simulation environment. I know you guys use probably a lot of simulation environments and things. So the data that's left behind there that can tell us things about location or the platform, the clickstream or activity data, we call it, the log data, assessments that are done in those platforms, interactions that students have if you have discussion forums, for instance, feedback that's given, etc. And then you have what we call multimodal data. So we can bring in things like eye tracking or gesturing and facial recognition, movement, EEG, skin conductor measurements. If they're trying to figure out if you're paying attention or if you're stressed under certain kinds of learning, they might do that. fMRI data even is being used. And then other kinds of data going more towards either this one I mentioned about air quality. I've read a research report doing that, and then other sort of health oriented data about sleep quality, if you're wellness, etc. So there's many kinds of digital data nowadays that we can get. The question is, do we need all that data? Which data do we need? Are we allowed to have that data, etc.? So most of the work we do that I'm going to talk about today is usually around some kind of combination of activity data or this log trace data. And I don't know why my system's acting on its own now, but we'll see. Okay. Yeah, so I'll come back and reflect a little bit on this data question. So if anyone has a question, maybe just yell out during the talk. I know I can talk fast, so don't be afraid to ask a question. Okay, so I could tell you a lot more about the fundamental aspects of learning analytics, but I thought now to tell you a little bit about what we do at the center, some research examples. So this one is both has some learning analytics in it, but it also has, we got some money from Oddrun Samdal on looking at the digital transformation of the university during COVID. So she put out a call for some research proposals. So we put out some proposals of looking from an organizational leadership and innovation perspective, looking at the infrastructures that are supporting learning and how they change. So for example, that we got Zoom and Cultura and all these things that, for instance, UPED and myself have been trying to get for many years. Robert Gray will say he got a streaming service from the university over basically in 3 days, and he'd been trying for 10 years to get it, etc. So things around that and how they had to lead innovation and change at the university. Adaptation to online teaching and learning. We had 2 large surveys. So if you're a student, maybe you answered the student survey that went out. There were 2 of them. We had over 4,000 students answering, and we had a survey for the instructors as well. Both these reports are available and have been presented different places in the university. We have done a study on learning design in online courses. We looked at courses in the fall of 2019 to see how they changed between then and the fall of 2020 to see if they're how they've taken into use different aspects of Canvas, for instance. Are they starting to use the other tools in Canvas? And there was a big shift towards using, of course, more aspects of Canvas and more videos and things like that. And then we're looking at the Canvas data to see if we can measure things from the data, because we would really like to do things digitally and analytically instead of having to sort of count things and that kind of data. We had a master's student who did a really nice project on student perceptions of privacy in learning analytics. And again, this was a survey done on UIB students. And it was looking at the 2 definitions that you find in the literature about privacy and how people understand privacy and access to your own data, which for us is very important because we have to make sure that we are allowed to use people's data and that they understand what we're doing with it. So one is this difference between personvern, which is the right to safeguard my personal integrity, to let me have a private life, that kind of thing. And the other is this right to decide when, how, and to the degree of information that I share with others about myself. So that's when we do our clicks and things like that on Facebook. And they're 2 very different things. So the majority of the students actually identified with that first definition. They don't think about it around their right to their personal integrity and those kinds of issues, which was quite interesting to find. We also asked them about sharing their data, and they were quite happy to share their data for learning analytics if it could help them improve their learning outcomes, but they didn't want to be compared to other students, and they didn't want the university to sell their data to third party, which is not surprising. Here's an example of a tool that we've actually developed. It's been developed quite with the Oslo Met instructors there. we helped them decide that they were going to run a MOOC that they wanted to run on Open edX platform that is offered to universities in Norway from UNIT. They can host it at UNIT, and you pay, I think it's 10,000 a year per course that you can have there. But there's no analytics in that tool at all because it's an open source version of it. So we have an agreement with the Oslo Met people wanted to have some analytics about their data. And so we collaborate with UNIT to get the data from them to show for that. And also now there's a new collaboration with the University of Tromsø with a group there that has quite a lot of data according to three courses that they have, and then we will extend this. So this is the work of Mohammed Khalil and Gleb Belacruz here. And here's just a quick example of the time. This is a very typical learning analytics dashboard where you can get statistics about how much time has been spent on the course. What's the minimum amount of time someone spent to the longest amount of time, sessions that were counted, etc., number of people. So this was a course that had 38 people. So this is real data, but we've hidden who it's about. And they had 38 people had 3,105 sessions over the period when they worked on it. This statistic shows what time of day they were working. So you could see that lots of them were working later in the morning period was quite popular. And then it was in the evening around between 5-6 p.m. There was a lot more. So you can go in and you can click on this and get all kinds of information. This is another one that shows a very quick overview of when they were and the number of events. So by color coding the different days, you could see how much activity there were on particular days. So you get a very quick overview really quickly. So here's one that's on this particular day. There was, this is another data set, but there was 147 users in, and they did 14,000 different things in the environment on that particular day. Whereas on this day, which is a blue code, there was only 7 users in that day, and they did 311 things. And an event is either they logged in, they did a quiz, they watched a video, or they participated in a discussion. So we have these ways of describing what events are. When it comes to the videos, it's really nice tool because you can see things about it. So this particular course had 12 videos. And you can just take a quick glance at it and see, wait a minute, they didn't really watch video 4 or video 7 or 3 very much. Why did they not watch those videos so much? And then you can click on it, like if you look at point 2, and you can get up more detailed information about it. So it was played 66 times, it was loaded 29 times. They paused it 23 times. Where did they pause it? You know, you could go and look at the video and see where did they pause it? What were they looking at? Did they stop somewhere to, you know, think about something? They seeked in the video, they stopped it, those kinds of things. So we get a little bit of information about things in the data. You can click on there and actually go straight to the video. Usually they've got the videos on YouTube and you can find out exactly where they were stopping and looking at it. So it gives you very nice insight. And so here I think they decided to drop video number 4 and have a lecture instead of video because it was maybe a topic that was too difficult. I don't remember the details. And then another thing they're looking at is clustering students and trying to decide if you should give them some feedback. So they've added this feature where you can get different kinds of statistics and groupings of students, and then you can click on something if there's a recommended action, or you can decide what you want to do. So make it really quick to give feedback to a particular student. So here you could, in this case, ask them for a Zoom call. So you want to schedule a meeting with them, or etc. And you can edit, the teacher can edit this kind of feedback they want to give to the students. So this is a new feature that they're just working on now. Okay, then I want to tell about ABT project. You have to watch the time here. I'll try to be quicker. So ABT project is a school project, and it's together with, it's owned by COES, which is the organization for the municipalities of Norway. And it's together with the Department of Education and Oslo municipality. And we work with 3 municipalities, 38 schools, and 11 ed tech companies. And just quickly here, students in schools use many different tools. So if you've got kids in schools, maybe you've seen Yellandall's Multi-Smart Irving. That's a very popular one they use in the evenings for homework. And then you've got Kikora and you've got Campus Matte, and you've got all these different tools. And for a teacher to keep track of what the student's doing in each of these tools, they'd have to go into the individual tools. So there's many motivations behind why Oslo would like this. It also has to do about not letting letting one vendor have a monopoly in the schools and having students be allowed to choose different tools, or teachers to choose different tools. It's a very complicated project. But what we basically do here is then take the data from each of these individual tools. So we take the activity data across tools, we put it into our own learner record store, and then we do visualizations for teachers on it. And this is just a quick example. So here we have a dashboard that has the front end, which the teacher sees. So here's a visualization that shows the areas in mathematics they've been working in, and a back end that has a profile of the learner that we use different techniques for building those. And then we have recommending and diagnosis algorithms running in the back end as well. And these can be everything from straight statistics to machine learning, depending on what you want to know about the students and depending on the amount of data that you have. So this has grown into a huge project that's much more about different things than just the actual learning analytics that's going on in the system, because it's this huge ecosystem for implementing learning analytics in the schools in Norway. So we have dialogues with the ministry and with UDIR, which is the Directorate for Education, together with the project and some of the work that's going on in UDIR about making national search engine for learning resources. And then the FADA, that is the national login tool. And we've developed our own tool for allowing, I call it the Spotify model of charging companies. So instead of each school having to buy a license for each tool they want to have there, they actually have access to all the tools that are available in a municipality, and they can pay by use. So we count up how many times they actually use a particular tool, and the vendors are paid by that model. So this whole ecosystem, I could talk again. I gave a whole talk on this morning to a company, or one of the divisions in UDIR this morning. So that could be 2 hours talk. But the other thing that's important about this particular project is we were selected to be in the Datatilsynets, the data protection agency's Sandkasse for AI. So this means that we're one of 4 projects that were chosen to work with Datatilsynet to learn about different aspects of being allowed to use these kinds of systems in schools. So we've been looking at the legal foundation for the use of privacy data in our application, this fog cart I showed you. We've been looking at data minimization, about algorithmic transparency, because by law we're required to explain the algorithms to the parents, to the students, to the teachers, etc. And how do we communicate with the stakeholders on that? And this has been a very, very intense half year working on this particular project, and we will finish by the end of this month, and there will come out a main report. The other companies, NAV is involved, a company that's looking at privacy and security within a company, whether they're allowed to monitor a company's employees to find out if they're doing dangerous things on the net, for instance. And another one is on doing prediction from blood samples about whether or not you are susceptible to get arthritis of a particular type of arthritis. So we have to look at whether data is allowed to be used. And it goes right down to the level of looking at the GDPR and the national laws and finding out which paragraphs in the GDPR can be used for example, doing the adaptivity in the system, so to adapt it to all the students in the class. And then it's another paragraph to allow us to use the data to improve the algorithm itself. So it's very, very detailed on what we can and can't do with these algorithms. Anything with learning analytics and artificial intelligence is considered high risk. So you have to carry out this thing called a DIPA, data protection investigation risk report. It's really 70 pages long. So every tool they bring into the school system, they have to carry out this kind of analysis for it. So it's been extremely, extremely learning rich for me. Okay, I think I've mentioned quickly, I see time's going, I mentioned quickly that we do some work on standards and architectures about how you can do interoperability between data sets. A quick example is somebody might be measuring time in seconds, someone else measuring time in minutes, and how do you have these data sets then talk together? So difficulties around that kind of thing and not having to just merge it. If we're going to have scalable learning analytics, you can't just do it yourself by putting together two different Excel files. We have to be able to do this, and this requires international standards. So I have one PhD student working on that. She works with the Canvas data also from the University of Bergen. So if you're a student, and maybe none of you are students, but if you were a student ever and you were asked this question, we're the ones getting your data. So anywhere between 73 and 83% of the students say yes to allowing us to use their data. And something was really interesting here because we've been collecting data for about 3 or 4 years. And it's anonymous. It's not, we don't know who it's coming from. But one time, one student from, I forget, it was HOEF faculty, thought that this person had to say yes, that we could have their data before they could register at the University of Bergen. And then I had to just have this long discussion with a journalist that caught on to this and with the student parliament. And I had to explain to them that we're asking to have access to the data that the university is already collecting. So this data exists. We don't know all the data that the university has on us as students and employees, etc. So they collect every time we start a Zoom conference. That's registered somewhere in the IT system at the university. So there's UNIT has a center called CERIS that has 178 different databases that are higher education data. And then the universities can ask for that data back. So it's the same thing here. We were collecting no data. We were sharing no data with anyone else. We were just getting access to use it for some kind of analysis. And this is really interesting to me because these are small kinds of nuances in understandings of where data is coming from, etc., that it's good to know. Just quickly, I'll just mention 2 other projects. We are involved in a big data project looking at peer assessment and learning. One of my PhD students, we studied the use of Multismart Øving, which is the only learning analytics tool that I found in Norway. And we studied its use. We surveyed, we had over 1,000 teachers giving us input on how they used it. We did interviews with them. We observed it in the classroom, and we wrote a big report on this. We've worked with visualizing competence development with firefighters and healthcare leaders in a workplace project that we had for a number of years. And we've even worked on giving visualizations of how firemen move around in a training situation in a house that's normally filled with smoke. So the training instructor sitting on the outside doesn't know how they're moving around inside it. They have a protocol for moving. And believe it or not, these firefighters train on this stuff all the time. So if they're not fighting fires, they're training. So we used sensors. So this was an example of these movement. So we had sensors in the room, and we had a mobile on their helmets, you could see there, and we could tell how they were moving themselves around the house to look for the people. And they have to go in and find a dummy in there, and they're timed on how fast they find them, etc. But they also want to know that they're searching the house in a particular way. And then we work with decentralized competence development of teachers. This is a national project going on with the whole country. So we're working with 10 particular schools, and we have some aspects of data literacy and learning analytics in there. And we have a number of courses. I've had correspondence with at least one person in your center. So we have a PhD course in learning analytics. It will run again next fall. I have master's courses. We have a PhD course on innovation, interdisciplinary problem solving, and creativity, which gets really, really high student feedback on that. So if you're a PhD student looking for an interesting course, I can recommend that one as well. And then we're developing these EVU courses, continuing education courses within the industry. And they're really related to this thing about data as gold and what we can do with data and things like that. Yeah, so just in summary, with data, there's many aspects to data. It's access. Can we get the data we want? Are we allowed to? Who owns the data? If you're university students, it's different than if you're in schools. And then there's the privacy aspects. Which data are we looking at? Is it sensitive data, or is it just other ID data about you? There's data, the context of the data is important. We have to be able to explain algorithms, and we have to remember that we cannot reduce people to their data. So the data is only one aspect of something that goes on in learning, but it can be interesting, but it's not the whole entire thing about learning. Scalability, these issues of interoperability, we need to have standards, and about algorithmic transfer. So algorithms that we make in one case cannot necessarily be transferred to a new institution, for instance, because the data sources are different all the time. And impact, we want to know that what we make, let's say we want to know that our dashboard is usable. Can they understand it? Is it used? And what kind of, and does our learning analytics help the learning outcomes? We have aspects around this data literacy, and of course there's ethics, privacy, and morality issues around everything. Okay, questions? I hope I left time for at least one question.
Yeah, thank you very much, Barbara. That was very interesting. A lot of interesting projects you are running. Yeah, so we are a little bit late, but we need to allow some questions. So please, is there anyone out there who would like to ask Barbara something?
No, I've been talking with somebody in the center who has data from the Future Learn. We had some problems early on getting Future Learn data, but now some of that stuff has been solved. So that's one possibility, is to help look at that kind of data. So that's very similar to the project that we had around with the Open edX data. So it would be the same kinds of issues there, and maybe you could look for patterns of learning, etc. Yeah.
I see that Ivar is raised his hand here.
Hi, Ivar.
Thanks, Barbara. It's really nice to hear this concentrated presentation. Did SLATE and iEarth end up with shared projects?
Not yet.
Do you think SLATE has the capacity to?
Yeah, I think we'd have to talk with Mohammed and Gleb for sure to see if they have some capacity. So I definitely think we can find some possibility, yes. And I think there's possibilities to apply for also some more funding to try to do it. We're quite full, as you can see. We're not many people actually, and I'm very I'm in the trying to hire. I have 9 to 12 positions to hire now. We've got our second 5 years of funding, and then we will become a permanent center after that within the university. So now that we've got a new round of money, we're hiring a new bunch of people, and our current PhD students are finishing up. So we will have a new set of PhDs and postdocs as well. So
I just had an idea that let me just suggest it. That your PhD students and the higher PhD students could just get together for a lunch meeting and share some thoughts.
Yeah,
that would be very good.
Yeah, and you could maybe, we have a Friday brown bag lunch the last Friday every month. At least we had before COVID, which we're going to start out. So some of your students could come and present something they're working on there and just get some feedback. It's sort of more informal than a formal talk. So just come and talk a little bit about what they're doing. Yeah. And as I said, we will have these PhD course again. That's really nice because we run it with KTH in Stockholm and University of Copenhagen. So we get very blended type of students, and they really, we had 34 last time. They really enjoyed it. So, but we have decided to run it next fall again instead of this coming spring. So that's also a possibility for the students if they want to learn about learning analytics.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. We have Anders Alberg. He's leading this iEarth research group, and they have regular seminars and where they meet and discuss different topics related to the various PhD students. Some of them are actually present here today also. So that's a very good idea that we should follow up on. I see that there is another raised hand here. So let's take one more question. I don't know the name. It's say KSNE. No?
Yes.
Yeah.
You have to put the sound on.
Yeah, so this probably my name is Xenia, and I'm a postdoctoral researcher in the University Center in Svalbard, Unis. So I have a question about your applications. SLATE. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing it. So as far as I understand, it's only course responsible who are using this application and collecting the data analytics right now, right?
You're talking about the dashboard I showed you with the OpenEdX, or?
Yeah, about your SLATE Oxalic application.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So that collects data, but it's only for the edX MOOC, open edX MOOCs. Yeah. So it's a very particular installation of edX, because edX as a company, they have their own, you can be an edX university and then you get lots of analytics from them. But if you're using the open edX version, like at the University of Bergen, we have open canvas, whereas other universities in Norway have not open canvas. They have, so we don't get a lot of the analytics in our canvas that they maybe get in other universities as well. So it's the open edX, which means that we're able to develop plugins for it to make these kinds of dashboards and get the data.
Yeah, but for now, are there only course responsible who are using this application while collaborating with you?
Yeah, so far so far, because we have to get access to the data and we haven't made the tools so that other people can just take the tool and then put it on their own data. So I would have to ask Mohammed exactly about that, but so far it's people that have asked us if we could, help them get the visualizations of their data. It's not open out there but we're discussing how to put it out as a, this, Creative Commons license or whatever. So I'm not sure. I have to ask Mohammed what his plans are in that area. Yeah. Do you have OpenEdX data?
No.
No. Okay.
Yeah, our university is not collaborating, is not using this application yet. So I think that one of the obstacles that can prevent our, for example, course responsible from using this application is the fact that they are already overwhelmed with their teaching obligations, duties. So maybe are there any plans of developing additional extra position for those people, for learning, for those people who will be focused on collecting and analyzing data analytics?
Yeah, I think the thing is, this is because I think I understand your question, but the thing is that every time you have a set of data, it's unique and you have to develop the analytics for that. It's very hard to transfer analytics for one data set to a new data set, because it depends how the data is represented. Like, to be very specific, is it 158 JSON files that then you have to try to get the data structure that you don't know the data structures of it, or is it in a CDS file, or is it in a XAPI format or something? So the algorithms need to know about the data and the data structure underneath it. So it's very hard to make something that's generic. So this particular tool is good for OpenEdX data because it's in a particular format. And then the Canvas, we can't just take Canvas data and plug it in there, because the Canvas data is organized in a different way. It's organized in this thing called pages, etc. So this is why it's, there's all these promises of these great tools, but it's practically, there's lots of issues related to it. Yeah. But you can send me a mail and I can ask Mohammed for you. You can talk directly to Mohammed. He'll be able to tell you more.
Okay, thank you very much, Barbara. I think we need to close the meeting. And